It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot. Hello, look at me. Ooh. Craig, shut up. 4 minutes in and I'm already wrong. This is called stalling. I'm on drugs. This whole show is a tangent.
Cool. That's why I dig it.
Shazam!
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, joining me is Rick Barongi, director of the Houston Zoo. Welcome to the podcast. Today's podcast is a real treat for me because if any of the listeners follow me on Google Plus or on Instagram, Craig Price 47, you've seen evidence of how much I love animals, how much I love going to the zoo, because you've seen the pictures I've posted of all the animals in the zoos whenever I travel. When I travel, wherever I go, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or you go to South Carolina, there's a zoo where I'm going to be, I grab my camera and I head over there. And today, to get a chance to talk to the director of a major zoo like the Houston Zoo was a real treat. And I didn't just do it once, I did it twice. You heard me. I did it twice, and each time was amazing. But before I explain my incompetence and why we had to do it twice, I want to let you know, because we're having the director of the zoo on the podcast today, I'm offering up all the profits of a calendar I've created for various pictures I've taken at zoos and aquariums across the country to charity. Now, many of the photos are of animals taken at the Houston Zoo. All the profits will be going to past guest Richard Zimmerman's Orangutan Outreach at redape.org. Now, a lot of you may remember Richard from episode 74. He is responsible for Orangutan Outreach, but also the Apes for Apes initiative, where they use iPads and tablets to enrich the lives of orangutans. Now, the orangutans at the Houston Zoo are also involved in this initiative, so donating to Orangutan Outreach is what I'm trying to do, is indirectly helping not only the orangutans at the Houston Zoo, but around the world. So just head to realitycheckpodcast.com and find episode 116, this episode, for all the details on how you can order the calendar for $14.99. It's just $14.99, and every penny of profit goes and helps orangutans. I do not make any money off the calendar at all, nor do I want to. I'm just happy to be able to help. Now, time for the confession. Yes, this is the second interview with Rick Barongi. Brian Hill, the PR director of the Houston Zoo, was the one who helped set this all up. And I really appreciate his help. And everyone at the zoo was amazing. Everyone I ran into, they were so helpful and so nice. And I had to do this twice because, well, I'm an idiot. For the first time with my H4n, my little digital recorder, I had some technical problems. So the first interview I did, well, half of it is lost into the ether. I totally screwed it up. I pressed some wrong buttons, and in a blink of an eye, it was all gone. They were gone. And when I got back home because I did this on location at the zoo, I immediately contacted Brian to let him know, it's all gone, and can we reschedule and do this again? And he, without hesitation, immediately responded, said, yes, we'll find a good time for you. We'll get this taken care of. Rick didn't hesitate to have me back, even though he met me, which is unusual for past guests. So the fact that all these things were happening, going on at the zoo, because the day before I interviewed him for the first time, they had a baby giraffe, and the day after I was there, they had their baby elephant, Duncan, and never mind the cold snaps that we've been having that have been strange here in Texas. Every other day seems to be in the 50s, and that's unusual for us. So there's all these crazy things happening. Then you throw into the mix the zoo in Copenhagen that euthanized the healthy giraffe in front of children and then cut it up and fed it to their own lions. That made national news. And so that is where we start off on this particular interview, talking about the Copenhagen Zoo and their strange decisions of why they did what they did and how it affects other zoos nationwide, or worldwide. And we did that with the director of the Houston Zoo, Rick Barongi.
Wait till it's 2 years old, you give it a name, and other zoos say they'll take it, and they say those zoos aren't good enough. And it's nice they're transparent. It's nice that we tell the public exactly what we do in a zoo, which we need to do. But in this case, the transparency has confused people to the degree that they don't understand the science. This is an ethical dilemma, and they didn't balance the ethics with the science, and now they're paying the price.
Yeah, and also doesn't make any other zoo look good, because they figure if the Copenhagen Zoo, I guess that was the Copenhagen Zoo, is doing this, then this is how all works in every zoo.
Yeah, our detractors, the animal rights extremists that don't want any zoos, are really feeding on this. This is a gift to them, because the Copenhagen Zoo is a very good zoo. They take very good care of their animals. They made a dumb decision, PR-wise, this time. They don't think they did. They're still saying, this science and management practices have to be put in place, just like we euthanize livestock, we hunt deer to control their numbers. But a giraffe in a zoo is not a deer. It's not a cow with a long neck. It's a giraffe. It's one of the most popular animals in a zoo. It's a beautiful animal, and it's just it may be unfair, but we elevate these animals to a higher level than animals in the wild.
And it sounds like there's places for that giraffe to go, or they could have spayed or neutered it, or sterilized it, but they felt they didn't have enough room in the zoo to keep it?
They explored all those options. They said they didn't have enough room. Other zoos that were good zoos would also be taking up space for more genetically valuable animals. Genetics isn't the only consideration here. You have to show more compassion. And even though nature doesn't show compassion, zoos have to be compassionate, because we answer to the public, and the public is watching us. They're not watching all the thousands of giraffe that get shot in the head in the wild. They're watching the one that got shot in the head in a zoo, and that is a different situation.
And it's unfortunate that it does have repercussions everywhere else. But let's talk about some more happy things instead. And I'm here with Rick Barongi, the zoo director of the Houston Zoo. You've got babies coming out of everything, everywhere you look. You've just had a baby elephant. Last time we spoke, Duncan.
Right. In the same week, we had two big deliveries. Our Asian male elephant, who the keeper's named Duncan. Love that name. And then also a giraffe was born just 2 days before that, last week, a male, and it was born on one of the coldest days of the year. It was inside, but it was cold outside. So they named it a Swahili name, Baridi, Baridi, and Baridi means cold, very cold in Swahili.
I remember that day because unfortunately I messed up the recording. This is the second time, and I want people to know how gracious the Houston Zoo and yourself is with your time. This is the second time we've had a chance to sit down and talk, and so I remember that day was extremely cold, and I didn't realize that it had just been born the night before. I guess it stood up fairly quick for a giraffe.
Yeah, giraffes have to get to their feet pretty quick. They're vulnerable in the wild. Even with those long, spindly legs, it's amazing that they're on their feet in less than an hour. This one, I think, 40 minutes, and it was on its feet, which is the fastest I've seen. I've seen one get on its feet. So, but usually it takes about an hour if they've got the right footing, and when they're born inside, we have to give them. We have to put soil down in the stall because the concrete would be too slippery.
Also kind of replicate the feel of their environment so they're not totally confused?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things that go into preparing for a giraffe birth. You just don't let mom do it no matter how good she is. You've got to make sure there's no that you've taken into account anything that could go wrong, and putting a much more secure flooring in there. Just watching the animal, knowing when it's going to give birth in case there are problems. This mother is an experienced mom. I think this is her 8th calf, so she's had quite a few giraffes. And
the elephant can't be any easier. You're basically delivering a smart car. So the zookeepers, not only do they have to worry about the baby, to worry about the mother, but because of the size, the injury could happen just by, it's slippery and it's heavy and there's people.
Yeah, and I think an elephant mom has got to be a more painful birth than anything because it's so big. Even though elephants are big, that's 300. This Duncan was 385 pounds, and then on top of that, there's the amniotic sac and all the other fluids and stuff. We're talking a lot of weight coming out of there, and at first she's very excitable, so the keepers have to get the calf out from under her, and as soon as it's on its feet and she recognizes it, then she starts calming down.
And then both our animals are very healthy. from what we can tell so far. It's only been a couple weeks.
Yeah, you always have to be careful in the first few weeks. Anything could happen, just like in the wild. But right now they're both nursing. They're both acting very alert. Both have been out on exhibit with the other giraffe and the other elephants. And this weekend, Duncan was out and Baridi was out, and we had a lot of people here because we had great weather.
Well, it is fantastic. And so we were talking about the breeding wise. That's when we started off talking about a bad decision, but having more of these animals is obviously a good decision, especially if they're endangered and especially if they can be in a controlled environment where you know the success rate's going to be high. But how do you decide which animal is going to breed? I mean, at what point did you go, you know what, let's breed the elephants? Because I can understand the small mammals. You know, it's close confines, nobody's watching, it's late at night, some romantic Barry White music, next thing you know, you have a small little marmoset. Where an elephant, they're not necessarily going to be able to hide what's going on. So how do you decide we're going to start breeding an elephant or a giraffe?
Well, it's not just the Houston Zoo's decision, especially with endangered species and large mammals. We have national and international breeding programs and people that work on pedigrees and genetics to make sure that that we're breeding animals that we need to sustain our populations. If we have too many of an animal, they'll tell us not to breed, and you can do that with contraceptives. You can keep them separate during the breeding seasons. There's all sorts of ways to do that. So we did get approval and recommendations from the giraffe specialist group. They're called Species Survival Plans, SSPs, and the giraffe and the elephant SSP and another group, the Taxon Advisory Group, that we could breed these animals. So that goes. So first we need a recommendation, and then after that, we know that we're either going to keep these animals for their whole lives, or that there are other zoos that can use them, and that gets back to the situation in Copenhagen. You don't breed an animal unless you know where it's going, if you can keep it, what are the options. You don't want to be in a position where you have to euthanize a healthy animal. That's just not going to sit well with the public. They're not going to understand that.
No, and then you also help other zoos in their breeding process, because I know that you recently swapped out, I hate to say it, makes it sound like they're just things at the grocery store, but you swapped out some rhinos because some males were viable for reproducing?
Right. I mean, when we look at a collection, when we look at our animals here, rhinos, we're not just managing the 3 animals we have. We're part of a much greater collaborative breeding program within the United States, and then there's an international program too. So we work with the rhino specialists and decide what's best, not just for our zoo, but what's best for the rhino population as a whole. And in this case, the best thing was to get the females we had in with a proven breeding male in another facility that has a lot more experience than we do, a lot more space to mix and match animals. And then in return, we got 3 young boys that actually are a much more active, interesting exhibit. They're not going to have baby rhinos, obviously, but they're not going to be here forever. So I think it was a win-win for everybody. But the basic primary criteria is what's best for that species and how we can maintain their populations and grow their populations in zoos, so that eventually, if we need them in the wild, they're a reservoir population.
Is there a situation where zoos are trying to become specialists in certain areas? I know that Houston's got a huge elephant complex that they've created and spent money on, and now you've become known as the place for Indian Asian elephants.
Yeah.
And then you've sent this other place to another rhino zoo. Is it something that you just kind of fall into? You just happen to become really good at it because you have the elephants? Or is it something that at a certain point you decide, we're doing pretty well, let's try to elevate it to something special?
Well, nowadays, it's because of the commitment. It was probably happenstance and opportunistic in the old days. You just got animals that bred better than other animals, and then your gorillas bred and some other zoos didn't, and you got a big group of gorillas like the Bronx Zoo, and they became a gorilla capital of for producing gorillas. In our case, though, with elephants, we made that commitment. We knew early on, because when I came to this zoo in 2000, we were down to 3 elephants at one point, and now we've got 8 elephants. So and we have a breeding program. But that was a commitment we made as a group that we were gonna that there was a need for that in this country. And elephants are very expensive, so that was a very expensive commitment. So most of this stuff now is planned out, but there is still some luck on. Sometimes you just got to get the right animals that like each other too. You can't always make them like each other.
And so how do you decide, like you said, you wanted to expand the elephants, you're doing other things, like you've just got a bunch of chimps that you rescued. You're getting ready to expand into a gorilla area, a great new habitat for them. Where do you make the decisions that, we're going to get more chimpanzees, we're going to get more gorillas?
Well, the first thing you do is when you're designing those exhibits, and the chimp exhibit opened in 2010, when we started designing that several years before that, we knew we wanted to build it to have the capacity to hold 20 chimps. We didn't expect to start with 20 chimps, but if we were going to breed chimps or get other chimps, so you have to build in the capacity. If you don't have the capacity, if you don't have the holding space and the exhibit space, then you can't take those animals. So that took some foresight. And then when the opportunity arose, there are not many zoos that had that capacity to take those other 6 chimps. We did, and so now we're trying to integrate those 6 chimps with the other 10, which is a soap opera every week, because chimps are very social animals, but they also have they're very opinionated on who they like, and it changes from almost day to day with a chimp, or hour to hour.
And they're not the cuddly, cute animals they can be, but not on a consistent basis. Chimps can actually be kind of rough and aggressive.
Yeah, you don't want to label animals as bad and good or vicious and docile, but chimps by nature are very excitable in the wild. Jane Goodall and the researchers out there have shown how violent they can be with each other, and they've killed each other and killed babies. Other babies of other groups. So it is a fairly aggressive animal, and you have to account for that. In our case, the best way to do that is to have their night room or their day rooms where they spend inside. There's many series of rooms in there so that you can separate them, but they can see each other. You gotta build in a lot of options, because you're just not sure, one day to the next, especially with chimps, whether they're going to like each other or not. Sometimes they just need time away from each other.
Yeah, and they rescued these chimps from someone had these 6, and then they were told they had to get rid of them. So was it like a call went out nationwide, or did they come directly to you because you have a great new chimp exhibit? How did they decide the Houston Zoo is the place that these 6 chimps are going to?
It didn't come to us. There's kind of a clearinghouse. There's a gentleman in a zoo in Chicago, the Lincoln Park Zoo, who coordinates all the chimpanzee transfers around the country. And private individuals know of him, and they'll contact him too. In this case, the officials in Virginia contacted him and said, hey, these chimps can no longer stay with these private people. Do you have a zoo that's interested? He put the note out. We saw that note. We didn't respond right away. We met internally and decided, yes, we can do that. We put our name in, and then they chose us.
And so you said foresight is a huge part of this whole situation. Without that, you wouldn't be able to take these 6 chimps in. So with the gorilla exhibit that you're building from scratch, which is supposed to be state of the art, and my wife and I are super excited about it, and we can't wait to see it in 2015. What made you decide, well, we're going to build something brand new, versus we built this for the chimps that we've got, all of a sudden now we have to expand. Now we're going to build this great new gorilla situation.
Well, we're doing the same thing with gorillas. We're building a facility that can hold a lot more gorillas than we're going to open that exhibit with. Gorillas are a social animal. You want them to breed. They need to breed in zoos also to just keep the population going and self-sustaining. So we'll probably open with 6 to 8 gorillas, but we have the capacity to hold 20 gorillas in there. And any zoo that's building new exhibits has to account for breeding, and also for separating animals out when they can't all get along, or you want to prevent inbreeding. You can't always just send your extra animals out to other zoos. Sometimes other zoos don't have room, so we have to build in that capacity, right at the design phase, and that gives us a lot more flexibility and makes decisions in the future a lot easier.
But where was the genesis of let's get gorillas? Because I understand that when you're going to build it so it can expand and all these great things and it'll have the capacity situation. But who said, hey, let's put gorillas in general? Because from my visits to the zoo, I've started going in like 2000, 2002 when my wife and I came back to Houston. No gorillas. At least I don't remember seeing that many gorillas, if at all.
It's a number of factors. I mean, the staff gets together and decides, what we think we should do at the zoo. But we also look at our history. We look at what the public likes. Gorillas are a very high-profile animal. It's an endangered species. It's an animal that's that needs more habitats or exhibits to breed them in captivity because they're, disappearing very quickly in the wild. So there's a conservation need. There's a public need. The staff wanted to do it. We had a history of having gorillas here. Our last gorilla, Mac, passed away of old age in 2004. And we always are getting questions every week, somebody saying, do you have gorillas? So we knew there was a need there, which means that there is a donor interest too. You've got to raise the money, and $29 million is not that easy to raise. But that's how much it's going to cost for this gorilla complex that we're building.
And how many gorillas are you going to start off with?
We don't know exactly right now because they're coming from other zoos. Gorillas do not come from the wild. They're all going to be coming from other zoos in the United States, maybe in Europe, and we're looking at our options right now. We have a bachelor group of 3 males that are committed, but they'll probably be we have an outdoor exhibit behind the scenes, and then we have a bigger exhibit in the front, the biggest exhibit, and that's where we'll put a family group. And right now, we have two females and a male identified, but we're going to try and get some more animals because that's a huge exhibit for just 3 gorillas on there. You won't see them, yeah. and it can accommodate a lot more. We also have another species out on that exhibit. It's a beautiful African bush pig called a red forest hog. You can put them in with gorillas. You couldn't do that with chimps. Chimps would definitely torment them or worse. Gorillas are much more gentle with these animals, and in the wild, they're seen together all the time.
I noticed this pairing that happens at zoos. I noticed that the ostriches and zebras always tend to be together, or there'll be ostriches and giraffes in the same enclosure, like they have here at the Houston Zoo. So is it important that you try to find combinations that work together, just so that it can be a little bit more environmental, like there's more things going on, so the animals don't get bored or things?
Yeah, we call them mixed species exhibits. We think that not only does it kind of simulate what goes on in the wild, even though this is a zoo situation. There's more activity on the exhibit. The animals seem to enjoy it better too. There's just more going on in an exhibit when you got 2 or 3 species that are compatible in the same exhibit. You got to make sure you've got enough areas so some species, if they want to get away from another one, they can. And so we have to incorporate that. But mixed species exhibits are always, I think, better for the animal and more interesting for the public.
So we're not going to see an antelope lion exhibit anytime soon?
No, those exhibits in a zoo wouldn't last very long. Even a zoo lion still has the killer instinct. So they can watch them from afar, but that wouldn't be a successful mixed species exhibit.
Now, is that something that you think about when you're putting in exhibits in physical locations, that you don't want to put something that like an antelope near the lions because they could smell them and get excited and things like that? I mean, even though lions can smell for distances, but the closer you get, you don't want to agitate them because it's like putting a big ham sandwich in front of someone dieting.
Well, it's not like that though, because most of our lions have never. They're zoo lions. They've really never killed an antelope. They don't even know what an antelope is. They can see it moving, and they're curious, like a cat, sees a mouse. So sometimes I think rather than being frustrated, I think they are fascinated by watching the movement in the distance. So more importantly is like with lions, if you have two we don't have this, but if you had 2 exhibits and 2 males close near each other, they might be roaring at each other all the time, or 2 You have to worry about that sometimes with some of our great apes. You don't want them to visually see another big male because they get very excited. But in a lot of cases, it's enrichment, it's stimulating, it's something that should be done. It's not tormenting them, it's not frustrating them. I think it's enriching them. It's just everybody would probably have a different opinion, but you have to really watch them to see if it's something that they enjoy watching or it's something that's bothering them.
Well, and humans project a lot. I'm on a diet now, so I'm thinking if anybody's going to put a food source that I'd know nearby, I'd get irritated. So they, like you said, they don't even realize it. They're just
no.
kinda...
I mean, you got to think through their head. We can anthropomorphize and apply our opinions to animals, but really you got to look at it through the animal's eyes, and you get a better understanding of what they really need.
Now, is the term zookeeper even applicable anymore in the sense that you see on, the people's idea of a zookeeper is it's one guy who runs the zoo in khaki pants, who runs around like Jack Hanna, who helps all the animals. Do you actually have a utilitarian person like that, or are they actually specialists now?
They can cross over to some degree, but they don't cross over with all the animals. Like in some cases, they don't cross over at all. Like our elephant keepers just take care of the elephants because that's a highly intelligent animal that needs a lot of attention, and they have to have personal relationships. With antelope, the keepers work with several different species. They do the rhinos, the giraffes, and the zebras, the ostrich, and the eland and some of the other antelopes. So that group can go within the hoofs. They're the hoofstock string, but they don't. But they don't work with the bird keepers. They don't work with the great ape keepers or the elephant keepers that way. In the old days, you were a jack of all trades, master of none. Probably, you didn't have as much staff, and you had to do everything. I know a little bit about everything. We're much more specialized now, and that's better for the animal's well-being.
And how many keepers are there? Is that what their title is? Are they keepers?
Yeah, we still call them zookeepers. That's what they like. I mean, I think caretakers are better, or animal specialists, but because they all have college degrees, or most of them do, or advanced degrees. We have over 80 full-time keepers at the zoo, and then we have curators and veterinarians and hospital keepers. So, our animal staff that works directly with animals is about a third of our workforce. So about 130 people work directly with the animals.
And you've got on-call full-time vets here. How many vets do you have at any given point?
We have 4 full-time veterinarians, and they have to be more generalists than specialists because all of them have to work with all the different animals here. Some of them have more experience than others with certain species, or they just have a passion for certain species. But they all have the ability to treat anything from fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, the whole gamut.
Now, one question I got from an audience listener through Facebook, and it makes perfect sense because we live in Houston, and we were just talking about that severe cold snap we had the first time we attempted this. What happens when you get severe weather? Because we have hurricanes here in Houston, and sometimes, like Ike in 2008, they're not little ones; they're big ones. What do you do in that case? Is it a hunker down situation, or do you farm the animals out in advance, knowing that things are coming? What is the disaster kind of situation plan?
We are vulnerable to bad weather, hurricanes, and especially hurricanes would be the worst threat that the Houston Zoo would have. We build into our facility the capacity to put animals inside so they can be protected. We build facilities that are I wouldn't say hurricane proof, but they can withstand most major hurricanes, like with Ike. It doesn't make any sense to try to pack them up at the last minute, try to catch them, which is stressful, and then put them in crates and try to ship them to another zoo when, first of all, the roads are clogged anyway. Everybody's trying to get out of town. The other zoos don't have room for them. The best thing to do is just provide the best facilities here and hunker down with the animals. We would never be able to evacuate the zoo animals. It would take weeks to do something like that, where you usually only have days.
Yeah, because when I think back, I think of New Orleans with the aquarium and how, they lost all their situation because they had, it's glass and water, and then when it starts to flood in historic, unprecedented like ways, they've added some new things that they're going to do. I think I've also seen in Eastern Europe there was some major flooding, and they showed thankfully it was high enough, but you see like a gorilla surrounded by water as it's rising, and I know people are concerned because that's the biggest thing about zoos is their detractors worry about the conditions and the health of the animals. Before I let you go, because I really appreciate your time, but I know that you have a real passion for the zoo, and you believe in zoos as a part of society, as something that we need to do, especially in the conservation areas. So as we leave, what is the most important thing that you think a zoo does for the people besides just show animals?
Well, zoos have a very strong animal care and conservation mission. These are the good zoos. I've been called a zoo champion, but I only champion the 10% of the zoos in this country, which I consider good, responsible zoos. The others have varying degrees of care, but their standards are not uniformly applied across the board. Zoos have a great opportunity to educate the public by getting them to first care about animals. If you come to the Houston Zoo or any other good zoo in Texas or this country, the first thing you want to be impressed by the quality of care that the animals are getting. Granted, they're in smaller enclosures in the wild, but they were born, most of them were born in zoos. They're not wild animals, they're zoo animals. And if we can get to people's heart first, I mean, you want to get to their head eventually, but we're not. Our visitors, our over 2 million visitors a year that come here, aren't attacked by, these horrible statistics about how many species are going extinct every year, how many elephants and rhinos are being destroyed for ivory and horns, or rainforest and acres of rainforest destroyed every minute. I mean, that can come later. They're coming here to have a good time. Let people have a good time. Let them enjoy this beautiful atmosphere. And as they're doing that, start appreciating animals more. If they care, then they'll want to learn. If they want to learn, then they'll want some action. So zoos are your first entry, your gateway for millions of people that never have the experience to go to Africa or see these animals in the wild. We're so alienated from nature nowadays that kids think hamburgers come from the supermarket. They don't know where they come from. We're informal education. We're not the classroom, but in a lot of ways, that's more effective and more fun.
Yeah, because I know you do a lot of conservation, especially there's a lion program that you've been doing, and I know with the chimpanzees and the now with the gorillas coming, you're going to be involved with that. So how can the regular folks like myself get involved not only with the Houston Zoo, but some of the conservation projects that you're doing?
Well, first, we get you to care when you come here. And then we try to connect our exhibits back to the wild, like with the lions. We have Lion Fun Days as the villages in the reserve, the lion reserve that we work with in Mozambique, have it at the same time, and we go back and forth. And that stimulates interest, I think, with our visitors. Everybody wants to know, what can I do? Well, just by coming to the zoo, a portion of your of the money you pay to come to the zoo will go to our conservation and education programs, or to improving the quality of life of the animals we have here too. I mean, the zoo is nonprofit, but it still has to run like a business. So knowing that your attendance here is helping the zoo, but if you want to do more than that, then continue your visit after you leave. Get on our website. Look at all the different programs that we have, whether it's an adult lecture or it's a summer camp for your kids or grandkids. There's so much. There's overnights that they can do here, and they'll learn more about animals. We do as much as we can, and we're growing every year. But in the end, it's going to take resources and commitment. It's going to take all of us to care about animals in the wild, because the zoo animals in our zoo are doing just fine, but their counterparts in the wild need our help. And you can do that by supporting our zoo's conservation programs. Well,
I'm certainly a member. My wife and I enjoy coming to the zoo, and in fact, I'm going to go out there right now and go take a look at Duncan, because it's very rare to have a baby elephant around. So I really appreciate your time, Rick, and thank you again for having me twice.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Once again, huge thanks to Rick Barongi for his time, as well as Brian Hill for setting this up all at the Houston Zoo. Remember, you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/realitycheckpodcast. We're at Reality Check Pod on Twitter, Subscribe to the newsletter and the RSS feed at realitycheckpodcast.com. You can find us on Stitcher and on iTunes, where reviews on either site are welcome and encouraged. And of course, if you have questions, comments, or guest suggestions, email Craig at speakercraigprice.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week.